Good evening, and thank you for attending. My name is Natalie Sayre, and I'll be the moderator for this evening's candidate debate. Before we begin, please silence all phones and electronic devices. Additionally, please refrain from any interruptions to the debate, as it is being recorded for on-demand viewing and post-captioning services. Joining us this evening is Mr. Mike Becker with the Citizens Clean Elections Commission. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor for this evening's event. The Clean Elections Act is a campaign finance reform and public education measure initiated by Arizona citizens and passed by voters in 1998. The Clean Elections Act was created to allow campaigns to be more issue-oriented and less negative. The system provides full funding for qualified candidates who participate voluntarily. The candidates agree to abide by the Clean Elections Act and rules, which includes contribution and spending limits, foregoing special interest money, as well as participating in commission debates. The candidates invited to participate tonight are in contested primaries. Candidates in uncontested primaries are not included in the debate process. For tonight's debate, questions have been prepared by Clean Elections based on a voter survey, as well as questions that have been submitted by voters through the Clean Elections smartphone app. However, we encourage live questions first. If you have questions, please print them clearly on the note card given to you when you walked in and hold it up. Our volunteers will pick up the cards and deliver them to me. If you need additional cards, just raise your hand. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplications, speeches, or personal attacks on candidates. The debate is scheduled for 2 hours, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we will do our best. There is an independent timer who will see that all the candidates have their allotted time to answer questions and will tell them when their time is up. Tonight's debate includes 1-minute opening statements, a lightning round. The first half of the debate begins with 2 minutes to answer audience questions. Each candidate will answer the same question, and we will rotate which candidate responds first. After all of the candidates have responded to the question, the first responding candidate will also be given an additional 30 seconds. And finally, we'll have the second half of the debate will allow a different question per candidate with 1 minute to answer. And finally, the closing statements will be 1 minute. If you have questions for a specific candidate, please include the candidate's name on the note card. It will be considered in the second half of the debate. We ask that you remain polite to all of the candidates and give them a fair and uninterrupted hearing, no matter how much you may agree or disagree with what is being said. Tonight's participants are Mr. David Lucier, Democrat, running for State Senate, District 26. Mr. Juan Mendez, Democrat, Clean Elections participant, also running for State Senator in District number 26. Ms. Isela Blanc, Democrat, Clean Elections participant, running for State Representative, District 26. Mr. Michael Martinez, Democrat, Clean Elections candidate, running for State Representative in District number 26. Ms. Celeste Plumlee, Democrat, running for State Representative in District number 26. And finally, Ms. Athena Salman, Democrat, Clean Elections participant, running for State Representative in District number 26. The order in which the candidates will speak has been determined by alphabetical order by last name, starting with the Senate for opening comments, and will progress from that starting point. The closing order will be determined by reverse alphabetical order by last name. Mr. Lucier, will you please start opening remarks?
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me, and I'm honored to participate. My name is David Lucier, and this I believe. To be successful, we must redefine the interrelationships of our institutions, public and private, nonprofit and profit, local, state, and federal. We must eliminate the walls and barriers to education, to prosperity, and wellness. We must eliminate the hedgerows that divide us and encourage collaboration among diverse units and stakeholders. The goal is to encourage success by initiating public policies focused on education and training, jobs and economic opportunity, and health and wellness, and by defining and operating enterprise-based supportive programs as an outcome of those policies. If you elect me as your next senator, I will advocate, initiate, and integrate comprehensive public policies and projects which focus on Arizonans and their families in the areas of education and training, jobs and economic opportunity, and health and wellness.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, your opening comments.
Thank you. I too want to thank the Clean Elections Commission for hosting us and for everybody who attended and for the people watching online. My name is Juan Mendez. I have had the honor of being your state representative for the last 4 years. Today, right now, I'm running to be your state senator. I come from poverty, trailer park, food stamp poverty. My family went through domestic violence and home foreclosure, and it wasn't our hard work alone that helped us. My mom was always working 2 jobs, but that didn't help us transition out of poverty. I'm here today as your Clean Elections candidate for Senate, as a graduate of ASU, and with a strong sense of civic responsibility, because my community cared and invested in the resources in my future. They wanted to see me succeed, and I want to help lead us back to a government that wants to see to it that the people of our community are as successful, not just the wealthy interests that fund their campaigns. My former Congressman Harry Mitchell is always to this day saying, you do not succeed unless a lot of people want you to. I know this firsthand. I'm running to take back our government from the wealthy special interest and return it to the people to serve the people, not money. But I can't do this alone, so today I'm running in a Clean Elections slate with Isela Blanc and Athena Salman.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, your opening statement.
Hello, thank you so much. My name is Isela Blanc, running for the Arizona State House. I am honored to be here, and I have to share a personal story. I remember the first time holding my 2 children in my arms and looking into their eyes and just thinking about their futures and all the opportunities that they were going to have access to. And I was even more confident because they were going to grow up in a school system that I grew up in here in Tempe. Now I look at them and I wonder what kind of future they're going to have. And so the reason I'm here, and it's not just me, I've talked door to door with lots of people, first-time parents or parents that have been in the school system for 10 plus years, and they're seriously concerned. And so I'm here running with Juan and Athena because we're committed to education and strong communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Martinez, candidate for the State House. I'm a 4th-generation Arizonan whose family has lived in this district for 70 years. I'm an ASU alumni, community organizer, public education advocate, and some would call me a policy nerd. Tonight, you'll have the opportunity to weigh the differences between candidates in this race. While ultimately we are all likely to fall on the same side of the issues, I hope you leave here tonight with a clear understanding of what type of legislator we all would be. Because that's what this election is really about. What type of legislator we as voters want to support. Do we want loud voices, or do we want effective voices? Do we want people who will say what is wrong with legislation, or do we want legislators who will actually fight to stop it? That's the choice that we as voters have in this election, and I'm confident that after tonight, the choice will be clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee.
Thank you. My name is Celeste Plumlee, and I'd like to thank the Citizens Clean Election Commission for having us here this evening. I am a state representative for District 26. I was appointed to my seat in December of last year and have served now for just over 6 months. And I'm running in my first campaign to be elected to keep the seat that I'm currently in. I'm an Arizona native. I've been raising my children in this district for 14 years. And I first got interested in public policy when I was in graduate school, and I realized that I had a really unique voice to share. As a single mom, getting public assistance, doing things on my own, that there were people who were establishing public policy who didn't know what I knew, and that there was something that really unique, that a place that I could insert myself and be very relevant in policy decisions. So from there, I was a member of Tempe Leadership. I did the Emerge Arizona training program for Democrat women, and I'm also a fellow of the Flynn Brown Civic Leadership Academy, which gave me great training in statewide issues and bipartisan decisions.
Thank you. And Ms. Salman, your opening comments.
Thank you. Thank you, Citizens Clean Elections Commission, for sponsoring this debate. My name is Athena Salman, and I'm running for the House of Representatives. As an Arizona native, community leader, and education advocate, every day I fight to strengthen the fabric of our communities. This year, I was presented with Tempe's MLK Diversity Award for my extensive experience advocating for women, working families, students, children, and immigrants. I'm a first-generation college graduate, graduating magna cum laude from Arizona State University with degrees in economics and political science. In light of severe budget cuts to education by the state legislature, I've organized hundreds of students to protest said budget cuts and help pro-education bills move through the legislature. I've worked on successful campaigns to expand Latino voter engagement, one in which increased Latino voter turnout by almost 500%. I have served as a union shop steward, empowered women and girls as a staff member with Girl Scouts, and built awareness and support for early childhood development throughout Arizona. I am part of your Democratic Clean Elections team with Juan Mendez and Isela Blanc, and I'm excited to be here tonight.
Thank you. So to break the ice, we will start with a quick lightning round. Please answer with just one word. Mr. Mendez, Pandora or Spotify?
Google Music.
Ms. Blanc, CNN, Fox News, or MSNBC?
MSN.
Mr. Martinez, Netflix or Hulu?
Netflix.
Ms. Plumlee, Lumberjack, Sun Devil, or Wildcat?
Sun Devil, 3 times so far.
Ms. Salman, Snapchat or Instagram?
I don't have either.
And Mr. Lucier, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Trek.
At this time, we will begin the portion of our debate where each candidate will answer the same question. The first question will be for Ms. Blanc, and your question is this. If you were to be elected, what would be the first bill you would submit, and what would you consider your most important issue to address?
Gosh, that's a really great question. And I'm going to be honest, I've been so focused on canvassing and campaigning and talking to voters. The first fight right now is making it past the primary. But here's the thing. I'm really passionate about education, and I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted that this state continues to cut and cut and cut education. And the fact that we're not having real, honest conversations about the growing population of Latinos in this state. And when we talk about Latinos being a first generation, I came to the U.S. when I was 7 years of age. I was undocumented. My first language was Spanish, and I was thrown into the system that when I was a child, it really supported kids like me. But right now, that's not happening, and our kids are being negatively impacted. And all we have to do is turn on the TV. What was it, Monday or Tuesday, they talked about 3rd through 8th graders not doing very well on the AZ merit test, and the fact that we have a lot of students that might be held back in 3rd grade. That is unacceptable. So right now, my first job is to win in August, and then my second job is to fight for education to make sure that we discontinue cutting. And then I'm also going to fight to make sure that we stop legislations that negatively impact all communities, low-income communities, immigrant communities, families that are working hard every day to just meet the basic needs. And I have to tell you, that's what my constituents are worried about. They're worried about their future and their children's future, and it might be the first time that they have sincere trepidation about their kids' futures, and that is unacceptable. So when I'm asked what's the first piece of legislation I'm going to put together, I'm going to tell you right now I don't know, because right now we are fighting to keep education, for it to continue to be funded. So that is the first thing we have to do. We have to make sure that our state legislature discontinues all the tax cuts. We have to make sure that we stop funneling money out of our public school systems into private and charter schools. We have to make sure that we also stop funding private prisons as well. And the list goes on.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, same question.
I tend to agree. The constituents in D26 have made it very clear that the issue that's most important to them is the state of our public education system. We have had drastic cuts. We are 48th in the nation in funding, and something needs to change. The first bill that I would introduce is something that I've actually have already started shopping around, and that is to bring back the maintenance fund for our schools. Now, the Auditor General a couple years ago did a report which said that the #1 drain on classroom spending is the fact that the legislature did away with the maintenance fund. So now, instead of schools being able to use specific monies to repair their schools, repair their roofs and air conditions, they're having to divert funds from the classroom to make those repairs. So one of the things I want to work on, and I think it's the first bill that I would introduce, would be to bring back the maintenance fund. And as someone who has had family members who have worked for MESPA, which is the Mesa Education Support Personnel Association. It's one of the things that is most overlooked is our support personnel in our education system. They do an amazing job and they don't get any recognition, and we've cut the funds for them too, and that's something that's not said a lot. But if we bring back the maintenance fund, the schools will be able to not have to divert those monies. We'd be able to have hopefully lower classroom sizes, be able to hire some more teachers. And if we're going to talk about education funding and where we start, that's going to be where we need to start. And I think that there is enough support on both sides of the aisle to make that happen next session. And with Prop 123, we heard that's just the first step. Well, the second step, needs to be the second step. We bring back the maintenance fund for our schools.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, same question.
Thank you. So after serving for so far through one session of the legislature, and I do understand the process that we go through introducing legislation and sort of how things move through. And so there's already been things that are in works that I've started, and things that are important to me that I've already identified as being, I think, quite possible in terms of passing legislation. So one thing that is crucial, I think, is childcare support for families, particularly low-income families. I know my daughter, she's 14, and when she was in preschool, she was able to be there while I was working full-time through a DES childcare subsidy, and that's something that is now only available to foster families. So what's happening is there's a really direct correlation between the lack of support for families and lack of childcare funding for families, and increases in DCS reports of neglect of children. So children are being left in substandard care because their families can't afford the proper care that they would get like in a preschool type of daycare setting. So if we're able to fund the support that those families need for their kids to get the care that they want them to have, then they're able to keep their families together, and fewer children are being DCS, and they'll get also the incredible benefits of early childhood education, which I think is commonly understood to greatly benefit children as they go on all the way through school and into adulthood. So I plan to propose legislation and work across the aisle, because I know as a minority party member, we need to get support of both parties in order to get any bills passed through the House, and then certainly also through the Senate. So work together, find the stakeholders, find other interested legislators who want to help to work together to fund those programs that families need to support their early childhood education, so that kids have that opportunity and then families can stay together. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, same question.
So the first thing I also thought of was childcare subsidies, and aside from the work that I was doing for First Things First and seeing in conversations how families can't afford childcare. 1 year for an infant for childcare in Arizona is the equivalent of going to a 4-year public university, $10,000. So I don't know any family who can afford that. The other reason is that when I was talking to a voter at her door, it's a grandmother who's taking care of 2 of her grandchildren. And in her household, she told me she has 10 people and they're surviving on her single income. And she's depressed because her grandchildren, since she can't afford summer programs, are stuck in the house all summer, not getting the enrichment opportunities that both our government used to provide for children in the community. But I would think the second one, just really trying to raise the standards of parents in the community, is a state version of the Fair Pay Act, which would dramatically impact women in the state of Arizona. So Arizona, women make 80 cents on the dollar compared to what men make, and that breakdown changes dramatically when you look at Latinas and African American women. Latinas make 54 cents, and African American women make 67 cents. And so what a state version of the Fair Pay Act would do is it would eliminate the gag rule of where coworkers can talk about how much they would make. It would also make employers report the incomes of their workforce in the Equality Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, and among other things. So this is also a priority.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, same question.
Well, I'm not going to be the bearer of very good news here tonight. Arizona is a failing state. Plain and simple. We live now in an oligarchy, and we now have a failing state. So, what one piece of legislation is going to save Arizona? Well, not a one, but there'll be several. I go back to my original kind of model, what I call my circles of success, which are education and training, jobs and economic opportunity, and health and wellness. It's a three-legged stool. You kick one of them out, and the others fail. In this regard, if you look at our educational system in Arizona, it's failing on several levels. I mean, we're not going to go all the way down in the weeds on this thing, but I think it's fair to say that our educational system in Arizona is failing and needs a massive amount of fixing. Prop 123 has done little to nothing to do that. Jobs and economic opportunity, economic development, hugely important for this state. We've got all the potential here in this state to become a leader in exports, for instance, in high tech, in biotech. Then we look at our health and wellness system. We squeaked by and kind of dodged a bullet a couple of years ago with Obamacare here in the state. What we need to do is focus on each one of those three areas, those circles of success. And I've already started a legislative program to discern where we should start. And so those are the three things that I'm looking at. I don't have one particular piece of legislation that I would look at, but I would look at a comprehensive package to get this state back on its feet and make it so that we've got a future.
Thank you. And Mr. Mendez, your response.
I love the optimism of this question, like if we're not Democrats in a Republican-controlled legislature. But I mean, I like we definitely should be focusing on where we're putting our efforts. When I come back, this will be my fourth year, and I've definitely introduced my share of legislation. But if I had to pick one, it would be focusing on our education system. There's not one thing to do to the education system to improve it, but we are definitely not. We are failing our community and our students, but it's not on accident. We are a poorly underfunded education system on purpose. It's the values of the budget out of the Arizona State Legislature. We could be investing more at all levels, and it's my focus because I want a higher educated population, not just because I want to be surrounded by people with higher education, but I believe that, and not just because those people will do better for the economy, right, because they have higher paying jobs. I want more higher educated people because I believe the new geography of jobs, right, where jobs settle in our country will be dependent on the locations that have a large collection of college educated people, because those jobs are job multipliers, right? They will affect the other jobs that are available, the amount of pay they receive, and how productive they are. But I mean, again, the Republican legislature has purposely underfunded our universities and cut all of our funding to the community colleges. So I believe the way that we really need to start is for a real heavy investment into early childhood education. That's where I believe all of our inequalities are coming from. Like one of our running mates had pointed out earlier. It's a sad fact that we wait until kindergarten to start investing into our community, when we miss out on so many opportunities and if we don't invest in early childhood education before kindergarten, we guarantee problems later on.
Thank you. At this time, Ms. Blanc, you have an additional 30 seconds to respond to the same question.
Oh, to the same question.
Yes.
God, I forgot about that. Okay, I'm just listening to all of my all the people sitting here, and it's pretty evident. Education's the number one thing, and I'm being honest when I say right now the focus for me is just making it through August. But education, the fact that we are not investing in education. I know in January, our state legislature tried to get rid of First Things First, and that's not okay because they actually focus on early childhood. So again, it's about really keeping things afloat.
Thank you. So at this point in time, I have a new question for Mr. Martinez. What will you do to support our veterans, both returning from service and long-term Arizonans, to ensure they integrate into and embrace the home they fought for?
That's actually a really good question. I think our state has done a pretty good job on opening up, our economy and our universities to our veterans, and that's something that actually Mr. Lucier has done pretty well with our universities, is making sure that ASU is one of the most veteran-friendly universities in the nation. So I think that we can, build on that and make sure that there is an economy here that is friendly to veterans, that our universities are opening up and enabling veterans to be successful if they choose to pursue a higher education. And that's something, like I said, ASU has been doing pretty well. I think in the past we have considered a bill to allow any veteran that has seen combat in Iraq or Afghanistan to automatically be given 30 credits towards their higher education, which is something we might want to go back and consider again. But I have a lot of family and friends who have chosen to move to Arizona because of the things that we have done and the things that we continue to do, and I think we just need to continue to build on those policies. We need to continue to make Arizona a defense sector friendly state, and we just ultimately need to make sure that any person who is coming back from combat, who is choosing to make Arizona their home, is taken care of and is not forgotten about. And the last thing is that really Phoenix has done this really good, but I think the other cities in the state should adopt this measure, is making sure that no veteran is on the street, that is homeless, because that is something that's a real problem, especially in Arizona with such a high veteran population. We need to make sure that no veteran is sleeping on the street in our state. It needs to make sure that we stop.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, same question.
Okay, thank you. I think Mr. Martinez covered many bases with his answer, so I'm not sure quite how to elaborate on that, other than to say that I think that I know there have been conversations about prioritizing veteran businesses in terms of like state contracts and really reaching out to help the growth of veteran-owned businesses, which I think is really important and makes a lot of sense to me. Certainly continuing to support the education for our veterans when they come back, particularly from combat health care, mental health care, and issues of post-traumatic stress disorder, and having the support that they need. The rates of suicides among combat veterans is so appalling that there's so much more that we can do, I think, that we can do in the legislature and that we can do as a society to be even more supportive of veterans and to try to understand. It's one of those things for me, having never been in the armed forces, that I don't have that firsthand experience to be able to relate to what that is like, but I also have enough empathy to understand that I don't understand, I guess. And so the more that we can reach out and be in community with everyone, including combat veterans, and helping to understand those issues, the better off we all will be. And certainly the issues of veteran homelessness are, as Mr. Martinez mentioned, something that needs to be addressed, and is homelessness for anyone is unacceptable, and I think that there's this the idea of the sort of paying this very large price in being a combat veteran that particularly we need to address and make sure that we offer the support that those people need when they are coming back to the States. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. Salman.
So I am a huge fan of Representative Ruben Gallego at the national level. I think that he's really taken on veterans issues and championed a lot of them, including most recently helping to treat veteran members who are suffering from PTSD. And I also have friends who benefited from the Veterans Educational Assistance Act, which provided access to a higher education, a 4-year degree. And so we need to make sure that those two things stay in place. But additionally, when we were canvassing, we noticed that veterans have a lot of experience when they're serving in the military, and when they come back here, oftentimes that experience isn't counted. And so how can state government help to ensure that really rich experience and expertise that they're developing, they can apply here to when they're back at home? Also, I attended a presentation with the Arizona Coalition of Military Families, and they did an excellent job educating the general public about what it means to be an active service member and what it means to be back at home in a completely different environment. And I support a lot of the initiatives that the coalition is championing, including Military and Veteran First Responder Initiative. So essentially, making sure that we're implementing evidence-based programs with firefighters, law enforcement, crisis behavioral health, emergency room staff when they're reaching and dealing with a veteran, because the trauma that veterans go through is just so unique. And so we want to make sure that everyone has the proper training so that they're connecting them to services or they're responding to PTSD appropriately. Both Mr. Martinez and Ms. Plumlee discussed the homelessness crisis that we're experiencing, and this is just so critical because Arizona's veteran population is projected to continue increasing.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, same question.
Boy, I've lived the life. I joined the Army, the U.S. Army, at the age of 19, successfully completed Special Forces training. That's a Green Beret, so I was awarded a Green Beret at the end of that training. After that, I went to Vietnam, fought in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. Came home from that, went to Arizona State University on the GI Bill, went about my career as an assistant treasurer for a large telecommunication concern. And then after 9/11, I became had a contract in Iraq, went to Iraq for a couple of years as a security contractor, then on to Afghanistan, where I served with the Combined Joint Special Operations Task Force. Upon coming home in 2008, I became involved in the veterans community. It's there that I kind of helped formulate this idea of this three-legged stool, these circles of success. Here's what I did with veterans, and it's certainly applicable to the non-veteran community: education, jobs, wellness. I've talked about this over and over. In the education realm, I helped pass the in-state tuition bill for veterans, which gave veterans the opportunity to come to Arizona State University and the other universities and community colleges for in-state tuition. Jobs, I've been speaking about jobs. I've worked with Kirsten Sinema, Ruben Gallego on jobs, wellness, health. I've got a great relationship with the VA, both the federal and our State Department of Veteran Services, all looking at each one of these realms in education and jobs and wellness. And we've helped bring in the educational realm about $100 million a year here to this district based on those initiatives. We can do that outside the veteran community as well.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, same question.
Yeah, so we've heard a lot of great ideas that we could be using to help support our veterans when they return. I would just to go over a couple of ones that have already been said. Yes, we need to be putting more investment into job training. But it needs to be targeted job training, right? And again, like our candidates have already said, we need to do a better job of valuing the experience they already have, so that we can better put them into jobs and they don't have to, fend for themselves when they first get back. But I'm also interested in other ideas like free community college, and more loan forgiveness programs if they get jobs in sectors that we really need employment at. Like I'm thinking like rural teaching jobs, those kinds of positions. We also need to do more to open up the research around PTSD. I know stakeholders who are trying to research the potential of allowing veterans with PTSD to be able to apply for a medical marijuana card. This would allow them, some kind of relief, so they don't have to become addicted to opiates, which is a big problem with anybody who's using painkillers. But we do need to be doing more for the homeless. It's not just the male veterans. I think we closed down our only female veteran homeless center in Maricopa County just a couple of years ago. So it's definitely we need to be drawing a lot more attention to this. But I believe veterans need the same thing that we all need to become productive members in society, right? We need living wages, we need paid earned sick time, our veterans need maternity leave so they can be able to take care of their families. If we provide for our society, our veterans will benefit also.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc?
So I'm just going to really share some of the personal stories that I've had. So yesterday I knocked on a door and I spoke to a veteran who was and served in the Marines and came back. And my conversation with him was really interesting. And part of the frustration that he stressed was this inability to find a decent paying job. And again, referencing the fact that he had established all of these skills while serving in the military, but coming back to his home, he could not find a decent paying job. And so that was obviously concerning. And then the other thing that he really talked about, and again, not really being familiar with this area, was this idea that we have a lot of companies that talk about the hiring of veterans, but again, not making a decent wage, not getting the right amount of benefits is something, it provided a unique perspective. I also have a cousin who served in the military, and unfortunately, he had a terrible accident a few years ago. He was a helicopter pilot, crashed in Afghanistan, and now he is unable to walk. And what he's doing every day is he's fighting for basic rights for him, because for the rest of his life, he's not going to be able to work a everyday job because he's struggling. He doesn't have the use of his legs. He has to constantly deal with medical issues. And so really providing that medical support. And what I just have to say, everyone here at the table has done a phenomenal job of really talking about the needs of the veterans. And I just wanted to touch on those personal stories because I only know of people who have served in the military and through the stories that I've connected with at the door. So I just wanted to thank everyone because you guys have all really done a great job of covering it. What more can I say?
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, an additional 30-second response.
Yeah, so I do want to just give a little personal story. And, I'm actually kind of a black sheep in my family. Basically, every one of my ancestors has served. My stepdad has served. My father has served. And my dad actually, in 2006, was serving in Iraq. He served in the Air Force. He was embedded with Special Forces in the Army when an IED exploded and shattered his neck. He lost 3 vertebrae. And when he came back, he had trouble trying to get the benefits that he was deserved. And I know my stepdad's father, I believe, had the same type of issues trying to get the benefits that we deserved. And I think the state needs to step up when the federal government fails.
Mr. Martinez, thank you. So the next question, Ms. Plumlee. The Constitution is the social contract that binds people, states, and the federal government. When was the last time you read it, and how will you bring the Constitution to life through legislation?
Well, okay, so the last time I read the Constitution was probably 4th grade, to be perfectly honest. In terms of, that's a good question. So I'm thinking about being in the legislature and the issues that come up. There are so many bills that come across, like hundreds of bills that I remember sitting in caucus one day with a stack this high, and each piece of paper was one bill. And questions of constitutionality came up often, mostly in how they related to the state constitution, because the legislation that we're working on, revised statutes, ties back to more to the state constitution than the federal one. relying quite a bit on the input of staff and other, mostly from staff, the attorneys on staff, to help understand the way that these bills line up with the Constitution, because it's very, it's complicated, and trying to find the way that the little loopholes and little ways of using documents that already exist to try and get things done or stop things from getting done is, I guess, what legislation is largely about. So that's my answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Salman.
So probably secondary school. Last time I read the U.S., but I think that it's so interesting because in our education system, so I went to public schools in Arizona, and we were taught consistently that sexism doesn't exist, racism, discrimination, these are things of the past. But over and over and over again, just like I gave you the statistic about how women make 84 cents on the dollar to what men make, over again, the data says something different. And so we really need to revive the Constitution. Starting with the Arizona Constitution, I appreciate municipalities trying to expand rights and protections to our LGBTQ community. But I really think that we need to do that both on the state level and eventually at the national level with the U.S. Constitution. And, you know, we have marriage equality finally, but I'm hearing stories about people in the community who are being discriminated against based on their gender identity or their sexual orientation when it comes to housing, when it comes to adoption, when it comes to their job. And this isn't what America's about. We're about equality. We're about, if you put in the hard work, then you deserve just as much access to opportunity as anyone else. And so I think we need to continue to expand the rights of everyone in our society through the Constitution.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, same question.
Well, I'm a political science major from Arizona State University. I graduated with honors in that, and I took a little minor in constitutional law. Now, it's been a little while since I've read the Constitution all the way through, but there are certain sections that are near and dear to my heart. The First Amendment, hugely important. There's a reason it's first. So, assembly, freedom of religion, speech, all those things. That's, without those First Amendment rights, nothing else follows. The second most important section to me in the U.S. Constitution is where we espouse to equal protection under the law. Those are hugely important words, and we haven't gotten there, but we're slowly making our way. The other day, we've had a couple of really good Supreme Court rulings, one on abortion, one on education down at the University of Texas. The Supreme Court is also it's a social history of our country. And so if you really want to find out about how we've struggled, all you have to do is read some of these Supreme Court rulings. But so that's my take. The First Amendment, hugely important. All else follows from that. And also the idea that we have equal protection under the law. That's hugely important, and I fight for those things. I've sat in Rules Committee down at the legislature, and it's pathetic. On the face of some of that legislation, it is unconstitutional, and they pass those items right along. And so we find ourselves in these fixes. I'd like to stop that.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez?
May I hear the question again?
Yes. The Constitution is the social contract that binds people, states, and the federal government. When is the last time you read it, and how will you bring the Constitution to life through legislation?
So I get a new Constitution every year, and an annotated one. So I've gone through the annotated one pretty often. I guess as a legislator, people just like to give me that as gifts. But I'm not one of those radicals who views the Constitution as some kind of where you have to strictly read it the way that people have been reading it for the last 200 years. I consider it a living document. How am I going to legislate with the Constitution in mind, I guess? I'm a big fan of the Arizona Constitution that states that education in Arizona needs to be as free or nearly as free as possible. So I'm always working to advocate for more affordable education in Arizona. We really need to make changes to our civil forfeiture laws in Arizona. Law enforcement is out of control with the amount of property that they are stealing from people, and there needs to be limits on due process before they can take property. And we should probably look into making it to where civil forfeitures go into our general fund and not into the budgets of the police. I think that would make for a better society. I'm working, doing more to remove money out of politics by strengthening the clean elections, and I think that's what people had in mind when they wanted a government by the people. I don't think they meant just people with money. I also think that our democracy is forever evolving, and so I think it's worth researching the benefits of lowering the voting age to 16, so that people who are 16 years old and 16 years old and older can vote in state and city elections. I think it'll do a lot to revive our democracy, to bring back participation, and to make it to where people are invested at a lot younger age. But there's still a lot we need to do, especially in Arizona, to bring back the idea of the separation of church and state. So I'll end there.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc.
Thank you so much. So that is such an interesting question. I actually skimmed through the Constitution a few weeks ago when I was at ASU, and they had it framed. So I looked it over really briefly and was just reminded. And I'm reminded about how interesting our society is, right? I think back a few years ago when the Arizona State Legislature wanted to negatively impact kids that were born in the U.S. to undocumented parents, and they wanted to take away their citizenship. That was unacceptable and wrong. Then you look at our voting rights. The fact that a few months ago we in Arizona had to deal with these outrageous long lines. I realized when I became a U.S. citizen about 20 years ago, I voted, and for about 4 years had no idea that my provisional ballot was not counted. That was not okay. It was unacceptable. And I had no idea that my provisional ballot was not being counted because it was a provisional ballot. My sister this week figured out that she was no longer registered as a Democratic voter, and she was now registered as an independent voter. So when we talk about the Constitution, it's such an interesting conversation because it is a living document, and our state legislature, our legislature is doing some interesting things depending on their mood, and that's unacceptable.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, I agree that it definitely should be interpreted as a living document. We wouldn't have the ability to amend it if it wasn't supposed to be in a living document. I think one of the things that stood out to me most, I should say that the last time I read it was in when I was at ASU. I took a couple of constitutional law classes, so of course I had to read through the not only the judgments of the Supreme Court, but also the Constitution itself. But I think one of the things that surprised me the most that while I was, working at the state Senate for Democratic staff, as mentioned earlier, the Rules Committee, the Rules Attorney would say, hey, this is unconstitutional, and Republican senators would be like, oh, we'll just change it on the floor and pass it anyway. Well, guess what? They didn't change it on the floor. So in essence, they're passing laws they know are unconstitutional, and they don't really care because they're doing it to make a point. And that point that they're trying to make ends up costing us millions of dollars in legal fees when it's eventually challenged. And if we want to talk about things like where do we get money for education, well, maybe we stop passing unconstitutional laws that are going to be challenged in court. That's going to open up millions of dollars for us. Ultimately, though, the 14th Amendment, that's probably the one that sticks out the most to me as a minority, and being, as Mr. Lucier said, being treated equally under the eyes of the law. Many of you may have known that Mesa was thinking about passing an NDO, but Governor Ducey asked them to wait for the legislature to take the issue. Senator Biggs, Senator Biggs, hopefully that never happens. Senator Biggs refused to take up the issue. The legislature is primed to take on the issue of a statewide non-discrimination ordinance, and I think with the right type of leadership on our side, we can definitely make sure that happens. I think it is. I think there is bipartisan support for that as well. And like I said, with the right type of effective leadership, we can actually pass a non-discrimination ordinance next year.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, 30-second response.
Okay. So I agree that I think the most important part of the aspect of the Constitution is that it is this living document, and that as it moves and evolves with us as a people. And I think that it's one of the most exciting parts about lawmaking is being able to have an influence on that and helping to ensure that as the need and the awareness in our country to expand non-discrimination issues and issues of equality, then we're able to continue to do that. And that's something that I promise to do in the
Thank
future.
you. Next question, and we will start with Ms. Salman. As members of Arizona's minority party, how do you intend to work to become the majority party?
Can you repeat it one more time?
As members of Arizona's minority party, how do you intend to work to become the majority party?
So some interesting research shows that Arizona every single day is becoming more and more of a purple state. And I think that traditionally the Democratic Party, or I consider the Democratic Party to be the party that's in the public interest, and the public interest party doesn't have a lot of money. And so I think part of it is getting creative about how do you create an equitable election system. And one of the ways that we do that, we're sitting in the room today in a clean elections debate. Clean elections has been huge for our state. The fact that, I as an individual don't have to go to special interest groups or go to PACs to fund my campaign. I can go directly to my voters and ask for small dollar contributions. And when you talk about equitability in Arizona right now, traditional candidates can take up to $5,000. I don't know people who can just write $5,000 checks, but when you compare that to $5, it's just a much more equitable system in terms of participation for campaign financing. But the other component, I think that's going to benefit both parties, but would also benefit the Democratic Party, is limiting the amount of money that traditional candidates can accept. Right now, there's Arizonans for Clean and Accountable initiative that is trying to get on the ballot, and that would limit it from $5,000 to $1,000, and so that again would be huge for our state. So continue to go in that direction.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lucier, same question.
Well, as your next senator, I have in a view three kind of distinctly different constituencies. Number one, the individuals in the district, as well as the individuals in our state. But we also owe I think, a conversation with various and sundry organizations in our state, be they profit, nonprofit, either way. We owe them conversation as well. But the third constituency that I see is our party. And anything and everything that we can do to advance the Democrat Party in this state is a must-do. I've watched over the several years the Republicans slowly take over this state from the very lowest office to the very highest office. And I have to applaud their capabilities. They did a pretty good job of basically taking over the state. It's a good model. I think we have to follow suit. I think that we have a better story to tell as a party, and from our perspective. I think that our party deserves a better showing outside the party and throughout the state. and we need to communicate those ideas to the constituency, and we need mechanisms to get out the vote. If we had Democrats if all our Democrats voted, we'd win everything that came up on an election cycle. So it's really, really important that we get out the vote, work with the party, and advance the party.
Thank you, Mr. Mendez.
So how do we transition from the minority party to the majority? Our biggest problem in Arizona is that we can't find enough qualified people to run for office. So we need to be doing more to get people to run for office, right? And a lot of that has to do with probably raising the legislative pay, right? I mean, who wants to run for office when they're only paying $24,000 a year? Only wealthy people who have their interests already taken care of. So that's one thing. And then changing the way money controls politics, right? Money influences who runs for office. Money influences what we talk about when we get into office. So I guess like one of the silver bullets, if those are our biggest problems, finding people to run for office and the money, we need to strengthen the clean elections program. And so one of the things that I'm doing to help put us in the majority is bringing back matching funds for clean elections, so that people don't have to stay on the phones raising money from special interests that don't even live in our state. First to frame it, we are the only state in the entire country that's poised to flip one of our chambers, right? So this isn't just some hopeful question that we're asking. We have the potential to do this, but it's not going to happen with just us wishing and hoping. So I am, my background is in organizing. So if we want to flip this state, we have to organize our voters, right? And so, when I first came to Tempe was represented by Republicans and had a Republican voter advantage. And we changed that by going out into the public, sharing our stories, connecting with the voters, and getting them engaged. And not just ending with them voting. We got them to volunteer with us, to take over, to participate in our government. So those are some of the things. Well, legislatively, we could start by having automatic voter registration. That's a simple thing that'll get more people out to vote, and it'll change our party. An interesting thing that I thought of that I'll share later.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, your response.
Can you please repeat the question?
Certainly. As members of Arizona's minority party, how do you intend to work to become the majority party?
Okay, so right now I have to thank the Republicans because they are doing a phenomenal job in the state of Arizona in helping us become more of a democratic state. I mean, all we have to do is SB 1070. SB 1070 did a phenomenal job. It was the worst piece of legislation that could have happened in the state of Arizona, but it was the best thing because what that did is it allowed a lot of first generation or dreamers to really organize and start fighting for their community. And so really, thank you to the Republicans. Thank you to Trump. We are making a slow process of changing the state, but it's because of those silly decisions that are being made. And then can I also say education? Education. The fact that here in the state of Arizona continues to cut, that we're 49th and 50th, all we have to do is join us on a canvas and talk to voters and find out how absolutely frustrated they are, and they are seriously concerned. So really, when we talk about what I can do, it's really what our Republicans are doing in this state to help us make that move to a mostly Democratic. So it's something I'm excited about. And I know one of the things that we are doing here as a clean elections team, Athena, Juan, and I, is not only are we talking to voters, but we are registering voters at the door. We are also talking to them about why they're registered as independent and really working and helping them understand why becoming a Democratic voter makes more sense. Because really, we are having to jump over a lot of hoops here in the state of Arizona when you're an independent voter. And even if you're an early ballot voter, I mean, if you are, you've gotten that ballot that says, do you want to receive your early ballot? Come on. Thank you to the Republicans. They're making it easier for us in the state of Arizona.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, it's actually, quite interesting that our state, we were rejected from statehood because we were too liberal. That was a long time ago. But, we've been saying that we're a purple state for at least the last 10 years. The demographics are changing. We're going to be purple. We're going to be blue soon. Well, it hasn't been happening, and I think that a lot of it has to do with, one, the Republicans are very well organized. They have a systematic effort throughout the state to make sure that they stay in power, and we are not organized. We don't have a plan. We don't have a long-term plan. So that it falls directly on the Democratic Party as a whole to make sure we get together and our leaders get together to make sure we have a plan going forward to make sure that we can flip this state, because I do think it is possible. I do think the demographics are changing, but we have to start with registering voters. I personally, in the last I think I'm in the thousands of voters. I know I've registered over 1,000 personally, in efforts statewide that has registered over 5,000 voters. And these are all new, young voters who are typically leaning liberal. But community outreach, too. We need to stop talking to voters like politics are the only thing that matters, because a lot of voters don't care. I know it sounds awful, but they don't care. As president of Maricopa County Young Democrats, one of the first things I did was start a community outreach program so that we could go into neighborhoods and show individuals that Democrats care more than just politics. We actually want to improve the day-to-day lives of individuals. And when we start doing that as a party as a whole, we're showing that we're more than just policies, we're more than just talking points. People are going to start being invested in our party, and that's something that would be huge for us flipping the state. And obviously Latino outreach. 37% of our population are Latinos, and I think the last meeting I went to about Latino outreach, excuse me for some that may find it offensive, but the entire room was me and a bunch of white people. Can you talk about Latino outreach if you're not if you don't have any Latinos in the room? So that's something we need to start focusing on.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee.
So I had a funny comment that was heard on the floor of the House by a Republican member said, if we fund more education, we'll have more Democrats, which is pretty awesome. But anyway, a few of us wrote that down. We're like, oh, that's a good one. So I think that absolutely increasing voter turnout would be really important and vital, really, in changing the minority party to the majority party. And I think one way of doing that is helping voters understand the absolute value of their vote. For example, there's Brexit, right? And all these people, they're like, what, wait, that counted? Like, what did I just vote on? What's the EU? Like, what's going on? And so I think that as an example, like that voters they think, oh, it doesn't matter, my vote doesn't count, all that stuff, oh, politicians, bleh. There's people with signs on their doors that say, no solicitors and no politicians, even like in capital letters, like I know I'm voting for, I don't want to talk to you. And I think that helping them understand how much it matters, how much their vote matters, how much them understanding issues, them understanding who they're voting for and what those people stand for and what they're going to do when they're in office is crucial. And I think there's this kind of a defeatist attitude, and there's also just the lack of passion behind getting involved in politics and getting behind issues and getting behind candidates. That it's an apathy, I suppose, in voters. And so to turn that around, to fire that up and help them understand how things really could be different in this state if they were engaged and if they were voting and they can see that, and they can have that tangible sense of, wow, it really is going to matter what I do, then people will act differently, will vote, and then we will be a Democrat state.
Thank you. And Ms. Salman, your 30-second response.
So I still stand by my comments about how much money influence and matters in politics. And up until 1892, this country, both parties, the Republicans and Democrats, were funded by special wealthy interests in the Northeast states. And it wasn't until our Congress passed the Tillman Act of 1907 that banned corporate speech were we able to take back the parties and really go to the people. The other component is FDR was a Democrat, and in that election, wealthy interests spend way more money than him, and grassroots organizing is what won him the election.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will transition to the part of the debate where each candidate will receive a separate question and 1 minute to respond to each question. I remind the audience that now is the time that you can ask for specific audience or specific questions to each candidate, and those questions will filter up to me. So if you have one for a specific candidate, please write it down and hold up your card. The first question is for Ms. Salman. How do you plan to defend traditional public education, especially as funding cuts become a constant at the Capitol?
So opposing tax cuts to corporations is a huge start. The interesting thing is that so I'm the first in my family to graduate from college. Neither of my parents could afford college, so they had high dreams and set high expectations for me to go to the university and get my degrees. And when I started at ASU, tuition was less than $5,000 for the year. Now students are paying more than that per semester, up to $12,000, and that does not include room and board. That does not include books, differential fees, other fees, and so. But simultaneously, while I was in college, and this goes back to the tax cuts that we give corporations, is cuts to education and healthcare was about 900,000 or million. I gotta check, but then corporations got the same amount in tax cuts. And so we really need to take a strong stance against that and really protect the general fund, which funds education.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, what will you do to support our senior citizens to protect and enhance their benefits?
So I think for the senior citizen population is certainly growing, and I think that there's a real need to make sure that we offer the support that they need in terms of being able to financially support them, and so they're able to stay in their homes, they're able to age in place as much as possible, stay where they are. My mom has Alzheimer's disease, and she lives in a memory care facility because she cannot live at home anymore, and so I know that the needs that she has are unique, and through the training I've had around how to help care for her and help to make sure that she has what she needs, I've recognized that there's a need for education for the community to understand what the needs of elderly population are in terms of being able to be supportive and understanding, and to make sure that we don't discard the elderly population, as sometimes tends to happen. They just sort of get overlooked or neglected, and we need to make sure that we are offering the support system that they need.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, you've been a strong advocate for for education in the state. What have you done, and what do you plan to do to help out the fresh graduates looking for help at our public universities?
Yeah, so for the past few years, I've been a board member. I've worked with the Arizona Students Association, which represents all public university students in the state. The first thing that I've done is, work to register students to vote. That's the number one thing I tell them that they can do to help impact their future, is to get out there and vote for the people who are best serving their interests. And if we can get them to vote at higher levels, millennials now outnumber baby boomers. So they can have the biggest say in our election process, and this is what I'm trying to explain to them. This year, we also were able to get another $32 million for higher education. That was part of ASA's legislative plan, which I'm, as Director of Legislative Affairs, helped implement, and we were successful. I wasn't happy to where it all went, but we got the money, and that's what matters. So going forward, that's exactly what I'm going to do. I'm going to use those relationships. I'm going to use that relationships that I built with the people on the other side of the aisle to make sure that public universities are as nearly as free as possible, and everyone can have access to affordable higher ed.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, from our audience, as a young female professional entering the workforce, I want to know your ideas for strengthening the support for girls and women to succeed in school, careers, and of course, government positions.
I'm going to ask you to read it one more time because I feel it was like a 3-part question.
Certainly. As a young female professional entering the workforce, I want to know your ideas for strengthening the support for girls and women to succeed in school, careers, and of course, government positions.
Okay, that's a really great question. So here's the thing. Arizona, because of our failing schools because we're not funding schools. We're having a really hard time attracting new jobs, right? And that's a part of the problem. So when we talk about, it's not just young girls, it's anyone graduating out of college or out of workforce development. They're having a hard time finding a job, and that is unacceptable. And so really, if we're going to strengthen for not just girls and young men, we need to make sure that we are investing in education so we bring those high quality jobs to the state. But, oh God, that is a tough question. Listen, I have a young son and a daughter, and I'm concerned about their futures equally. That's the bottom line. I'm concerned about their futures equally, period.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, do lobbyists have too much influence over the lawmaking process? And if so, how can we rein in their influence?
Yes, the lobbyists have way too much control over politics in Arizona, and there's much we can do to rein in their influence. First of all, we need to have more reporting on the money they spend at the legislature. I would like to see that we just outright ban the lobbyist funding for politicians to go on speaking engagements or for flights and hotels and things like that. I think one big way to end the corruption would be to put a ban to where politicians have to wait 4 years after serving before they can become a lobbyist. I think that would do a lot to end the corruption. But I mean, real simple, just to lay out the environment. We have an environment that is suited to benefit the lobbyists, right? We have so little time to work on legislation, right? Everything is sped through at the speed of business. The lobbyists are paid so much more than the state legislators. They have so much more support staff we've created an environment on purpose that makes it to where politicians are dependent on lobbyists for information. So the best thing we could do would be to have a fully funded modern legislature.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, your question. What steps do you support to reduce Arizona's huge prison population?
Education, education, education. I mean, we know by the third grade, if a kid can't read, the probabilities of that kid going to prison are pretty high. Ergo, I mean, it seems like we've got a prima facie case here for more funding, more investment for education. We can either raise really smart kids, or we can start raising criminals and filling the demand of private prisons in this state. We spend more, far more, in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars more on prisons in this state than we do kids in your university. On the other hand, it's about $24,000 a year to keep somebody in prison, and it's about $10,000 a year, $12,000 a year at ASU to put them through school. So I would say education, education, education.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, what is your position on charter schools, especially funding?
So I attended an excellent presentation a few months ago about charter schools, and essentially the legislature has created empowerment scholarship accounts where parents can use state funding to go to a charter school, which takes money away from public schools. And essentially charter schools are draining our public school system. And it's surprising because Arizona is number one for what's called school choice, and yet 85% of our parents decide to put their children in public schools. Charter schools are less efficient. The Grand Canyon Institute showed that charter schools per student spend more than what it costs to educate a child at a public school. So we need to rein this in and limit it and provide more oversight. There's also, with the scholarship accounts, no accountability on how that money's being spent. So we don't even know if that's getting spent on the student's education.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, did you support Prop 123? If so, why?
I get asked this question a lot. So my answer is I barely supported Prop 123. And that for very specific reasons. And I literally went back and forth, and I would think, I think it's all right. And then I'd talk to one more person, and I'd be like, no, I can't support that. There are so many problems in Prop 123. But here's what I came up with. And finally, in the end, I talked to the superintendents in the district. I talked to teachers in the district, and ultimately found that the majority of everybody I talked to said, yes, we are just barely in support of it. And so I think that its passage is beneficial in the fact that it gives money to schools right now, puts an end to the lawsuit, allows us to sort of package that up and move on. Now the steps 2 and 3 are vitally important to find out. We need to get different people in office, for one thing, who will fund education differently than it has been recently, and then to make sure that we have support for schools going forward. This is not the end.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, what have you done successfully around higher education, and how are you a real advocate for it?
Well, I mean, that's almost like the same question as before, but I mean, that's really what it is. I believe, with all due respect to everyone else that is up here on this dais, that I have been one of the strongest advocates for higher education in our state, not just here locally, but at a national level as Young Democrats of America, the chair of the Young Democrats of America College Caucus. I've implemented national college leadership academies that are still going, that have empowered college students to become effective advocates. As from ASA, not only have we done registering voters, but I helped this year bring back the LobbyCon for ASA, which we trained Arizona students from across the state how to be effective and how to message their issues. And we took them to the legislature, and we got them meetings with legislators. I believe Representative Plumlee was one of the representatives they met with, but we taught them how to advocate for their issues, and went out there and got them meetings so that they could advocate. So that's what we really got to do. We need to find ways to empower our students, and that's what I've done, and that's what I'll continue to do.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, how do you support and balance the needs of all Arizonans, and who is your priority, Americans or immigrants?
Okay, here's the bottom line. Everyone is a priority in the state. I don't even know how to respond to that question. Okay, so I'm out talking to people every day, and I am talking to community members with mixed status. They have kids that were born in the U.S., and the parents may have papers, they may not have papers, but at the end of the day, these kids are here in our school system, and actually, there was a really great report. In 2010, a report came out called Dropped, and it talked about our greatest asset, which is Latino children. And when we focus on educating Latino children, then we're positively impacting all children, because Latino children tend to be in poverty. But when we are touching all these kids, we are touching every child. We are touching African American kids. We're talking about white kids, every child. So really, that is an incredible question. We are all here in this country, and we are here to make it better.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, what legislation have you sponsored as a House member?
I have sponsored lots of legislation, real simple stuff that gets neglected by the Republicans. I'm afraid that there are too many students in our schools who don't get vaccinated. Right, and I would think it's just for public good that we should know which schools have the most students without vaccinations. I've authored that bill all 4 years that I've been at the legislature. It's gotten into committee, but never out of committee. But I can't understand why people don't want their population to know the safety. That's just one piece of legislation that I've introduced. Was that the question? Just one piece of legislation?
What legislation in general?
In general, paid earned sick time, maternity leave for all family members, more child care assistance, subsidizing child care assistance so that more people can take advantage of it. I've authored legislation to, honestly, I've offered lots of legislation. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, what will you do to make up for the evisceration of the Voting Rights Act by the Supreme Court as it has affected Arizona, for example, enabling the March 22 primary fiasco?
What would I do?
Yes.
Well, I'd revise the voting rules, for one. I'd revise rules for voter registration. I would outlaw dark money and reform clean elections. I think that just recently, I think the last session, or maybe the one before it, we had a piece of legislation that went through that requires high school students to pass basically a citizenship test in order to graduate. And I'm sitting there thinking, and I mentioned it to several people, well, if that's a requirement, then they should automatically be registered to vote right then and there. If they're not 18, they could be put in a queue until their birthday. That's a simple fix. But that's something that I think could and should take place. But those are basically the items that I think would help.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, legislatures are supposed to follow the laws they write. What do you think of candidates who broke the rules and put up signs before they were legally allowed?
So Tempe actually has an ordinance where you can put up signs 120 days before the election. And also political speech is protected under the First Amendment. So that is pretty much, I'm a huge advocate for free speech. And in this country, we need to ensure that is protected. As it was mentioned earlier, it is our first and most important amendment. So thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Plumlee, so what is your position on private prisons, and what is a problem that you see with them, and how would you fix it?
So the biggest problem that I see, the most obvious glaring one with private prisons, is promising a private prison industry how many prisoners they're going to get. That is flawed and, insurmountably. It's ridiculous. And so I think that the idea that there are anybody who is profiting from other people committing crimes, and that then there's this incentive to catch people committing crimes or to punish them, and it's a corruption in the system that is pretty horrendous. And so as far as addressing that goes, I think there should not be private prisons. I think that would be pretty much wiping those out completely would take care of a lot of those problems. And that a lot of people who are incarcerated for nonviolent offenses, for things that can be through community correction centers and through other means, certainly can be dealt with, where they do not need to be behind bars for the cost that it is to their lives, their families, their communities, and also to the state.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, how would you combat voter disenfranchising like we had this year?
I actually testified at the Special Elections Committee, and one of the things that I brought up was I had a good friend of mine put up a map of voting locations based on poverty levels in areas around the. Someone going to answer that, maybe, Athena?
That is an urgent question coming in.
Right? That red light came on. I was like, oh no. It could have been a really important question. I don't know. I testified to this, and what I saw with this map was that there's 2 or maybe 3 locations in areas in highly impoverished neighborhoods. That's absolutely ridiculous. So what I think one of the biggest things that we can do, and this actually was brought up to me by a constituent, is we can stop calling it election day and start calling it election period, where people have 2 weeks to vote leading up to the election. That gives the ability for people who are in impoverished neighborhoods, who have to work, who have families they need to take care of, and cannot commit hours to stand in line, to go in to a county recorder's office and vote really quickly. I think that is a reasonable thing that we can do to change our election system and increase voter turnout. It's something that no one's really talking about, and that's something I actually want to work on when I'm your state representative.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, do you support Arizona's law to allow the use of marijuana for medical purposes?
Yes, I do. I remember when that petition came out, and I actually signed it. And in fact, I would actually support legalizing it. And the reason for it is because there's a lot of African and Latino and people going to prison. And it has been found that a lot of these people who end up getting felonies on their records are negatively impacted in their personal lives through jobs, incarceration, et cetera, et cetera. And it's really impacting minority communities, and that's unacceptable. And a lot of these people are non-violent criminals. And yet, when you look at the percentage of people being arrested for marijuana use in comparison to people who use opiates or serious drugs that are incredibly addictive, it doesn't compare. And again, marijuana is predominantly negatively impacting certain communities, and that is unacceptable. So yes, I would not only support it and did support it medically, but also for legalization.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, with the passing of Prop 123, what would you do to create a long-term solution beyond the life of this initiative?
Well, so I believe the initiative does very little. I mean, there's some school districts that'll be able to provide small pay raises to their teachers. Some school districts won't be able to do that at all. So going forward, what we need to do to ensure that we have a public education system in the future is fund our public education accordingly. We have to stop tax cuts. We have to do a lot for teacher retention. I'm a substitute teacher for our Tempe and Mesa high schools. You would not believe how many classrooms do not have full-time teachers and just cycle through subs. It's embarrassing and insulting to the children's education. They're missing out on integral parts of their education. So teacher retention, higher pay for our teachers. We need to bring back some kind of version of Prop 301 so we can get more funding into education. And then next is the school buildings. We've already been sued for not investing in our schools. We're going to be sued again because of the little attention we put to our school buildings.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, in what way are you willing to speak up and be a voice for women?
Well, that's an easy one. My mother was a women's air service pilot in World War II, way ahead of her time. And that's the kind of household I was raised in. I was also raised in a household of seven girls. And they run the political spectrum, believe me. I was an early advocate, way early advocate, and supported the Equal Rights Amendment. I would love to see that one come back. Barring that, I think that if we fall back on this idea of equal protection under the law, that people would have a pretty tough time denying that, whether it's professional, whether it's education, whatever the aspect is. I believe that women, females, girls, all deserve equal opportunity throughout their lives.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, please give your opinion on striker bills and their recent use.
Striker bills have definitely been abused by the Arizona State Legislature. And for those of you who don't know what that is, essentially the Republicans will have a bill that's kind of a moot point, and they'll save it till the end. So when bad legislation dies in committee, they'll still be able to bring back that bill on the floor, on the committee of the whole. So I would be interested in reining that in and creating rules against that. And I think we have a good opportunity to do that if the Democrats get 50% in the Senate. Because if the Democrats are able to achieve a 50% Senate, then both Democrats and Republicans get to pick the Senate president. And so our party isn't beholden to one party's role. Right now, there's just no accountability because, unfortunately, the Republicans control both the House and the Senate. And so we don't have much control over that. So hopefully there'll be some change in the next legislative session.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, with the rise of mass shootings happening, what is your plan to help Arizona citizens feel safe in their own cities and states?
So I think one thing that is important is the complete ban of access to assault weapons. I think the amount of damage that can be done in a very short amount of time with that type of weaponry is really horrendous, and certainly no way in the minds, even the imaginations of the founding fathers who first initiated this idea that it would be okay for citizens to have weapons, or to have guns in particular. And I think it's also really important that we strengthen but expand the use of background checks for people who are able to purchase weapons. So people who are on the terror watch list, or people who are prohibited possessors because of having domestic violence charges or other type of violent charges against them that aren't supposed to have guns, to make sure that those people cannot get them. We close the gun show loopholes, right, and the private transfer loopholes. Thank you.
Mr. Martinez. So SB 1428 allows public safety workers to opt out of the pension system, or PSPRS. What do you think the impact would be on municipalities of this?
That's actually a really good question, and it's something that's being brought up, I know, especially in Mesa, where the taxpayers are taking on a huge liability for pensions. The Mesa Police Association came out against Prop 124. I think they're the only association that came out against it. And the one thing that concerns me about moving from a pension system to a private investment account is, in the case, heaven forbid, that an officer or a firefighter loses their life in the line of duty. In the terms of pension, that pension is made available to their family immediately. In terms of a private investment account, that would not be made available to them immediately without risking early penalties. So, it may make it a little bit easier for the municipalities to move to a private system, private investments accounts, but I think that we owe it to our public safety officials to invest in their pensions, even if it is a liability for the cities.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc. In general, what are your thoughts on ways the state should address the ongoing drought affecting Lake Mead and the Colorado River in order to ensure a stable water supply for future generations?
Gosh, I should have been paying more attention to Ben Graff, who's running for the Water Board Conservation. Listen, there's definitely an issue, and I am seriously concerned about it. And I think one of the things I did hear, because there's always a special about once a year, because, we take priority on water issues here in the state, is that we don't have enough people who are in charge of making sure that we have enough water rights, making sure that there's that 100-year water use in state government. So one of the first things is making sure that department has the right number of people being able to do their jobs. So that is one thing I would definitely do, is because we are obviously not funding that, and we don't have the right number of people doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, what do you plan to do to bring equality to fathers being denied rights to their children in family court when there is no domestic violence or criminal history?
Say it again.
What do you plan to do to bring equality to fathers being denied rights to their children in family court when there is no domestic violence or criminal history?
If the fathers are being denied rights because in family court, if they've been taken to family court and the family doesn't want to be a family anymore, and the fathers think it's unfair, I think we still need to be giving attention to the child. Regardless of what the father thinks, our focus should be on the child. We shouldn't be putting any undue restrictions that stop the mother and child from being able to fully move around the state, to be able to go to whatever school they want to go to, or to take a job in a different community. I think that children's rights supersede what the fathers believe that they're being shortchanged.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, how can our district better leverage the young talent coming out of ASU to strengthen our community?
Excuse me. Well, retention of our college graduates is a huge concern, and unfortunately, we seem to be failing pretty badly at that particular task. Recent numbers have been coming out, and a vast majority of these young men and women who are graduating are leaving the state, and so we need perhaps tax credits that would help help them stay in the state by being employed locally, working with local employers to do a little bit more, I guess, job searching within the colleges and universities, and then the same kind of model that we could use that we've used for veterans, with a focus on that demographic and those young men and women, working closely with the employers in the state to keep them here.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, all the candidates have said we are failing at state education, at the state. Let me rephrase this. All candidates say we have a failing state and education is being cut and children are failing AZ merit. But what is the first step on fixing education?
So I think it's been covered. Aside from fully funding education, the teacher retention piece is critical. I have an aunt who's been a teacher for almost 2 decades, and for at least half a decade, if not longer. And she has her master's degree in teaching, has so much passion for the kids that she teaches, and just hasn't had a raise. Hopefully her school district will give her a raise now that Prop 123 has passed. But when I was a student at ASU, I was in a community service organization, as you can imagine, a community service organization attracted a lot of teaching majors. But because the climate for teachers in Arizona is so negative, I can count on one hand out of 40 young women who have their bachelor's in teaching, who decided to stay in the profession, and maybe one is still in Arizona. The others decided to go to California and Washington. So if we're really going to reverse the state of education in our state, in addition to fully funding our schools, we need to also be investing in our teachers.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, as heroin and prescription drug overdoses continue to escalate in Arizona, what steps would you take legislatively to help combat the ongoing opioid epidemic?
So one thing that was passed through the House this last session was to have a database that all prescribing physicians would have access to in order to track the prescriptions, given to different people, so they're not able to go from doctor to doctor and continue to get excessive amounts of opioids. And so that is something that I think is really beneficial. And I think there's an education piece, but also any kind of drug addiction comes back to the issues of trauma and come back to issues of primary prevention. And so I have a degree in social work, a master's degree in social work. And one thing that I'm very aware of is that the adverse childhood experiences and the things that people experience, the trauma that they experience early in their life or really at any point in their life, contribute to issues of addiction. And so really addressing those issues as the root of the problem is where to find an answer.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, how would you fix the state budget?
60 seconds, yeah, go. Wow. Well, I mean, I legitimately have a response for this, and that is the one thing is I sat in an interview, a meeting with Senator Biggs and Representative Farnsworth and Peterson, and they were complaining about how we didn't have the money to fix public education, transportation, child protective services, and all these vital services. And I said, well, maybe we have a revenue problem in our state. And, Representative Farnsworth said, well, that's not going to change while I'm in office. And I said, well, if we have these issues funding these vital services and you don't want to address that issue, then I respectfully telling you that you're not doing your job well. That ended that meeting pretty quickly. But the root of the thing is we have the same state budget as roughly Montana, while the population of that is equal to Massachusetts, they take in $12 billion more in tax revenue than we do. I'm not saying we should raise taxes by $12 billion, but we need to have a serious conversation with both sides of the aisle, what we're going to do about our revenue stream and how to make a long-term sustainable plan for our revenue.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc. If elected, what steps would you take to continue diversifying Arizona's economy, and what industries and sectors would you focus on?
Okay, it's so funny. I went to a meeting and somebody said, you seem to be a one-issue candidate. Because I kept talking about education, and I have to tell you, the Business Journal came out with a report or an article about a year ago, and 3,000 high-paying jobs were lost to the state of Arizona, specifically Phoenix, for two reasons. Education, the fact that we don't fund it, and number two, Sheriff Joe, which I thought was really interesting. So really, if we're going to diversify our economy, we need to start investing in children, starting in preschool all the way through college, and that's what's going to bring people and new economies and new companies to the state. And so not that I'm a one-issue candidate, but I'm smart enough to know that we need to invest in education.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, you stated that we should raise teachers' salaries. How do you plan on achieving this?
By raising teacher salaries. I think the money is there. We just choose not to fund education properly. So there's not anything. There's no like complex taxes that's holding us back. There's no. There is money in our budget. There's money in our rainy day budget. We don't have to come up with some land deal scheme in order to fund education. We just fund education if we wanted to. And this state refuses to fund education to allow us to properly pay teachers.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, a 2015 news report noted Arizona is facing a multi-billion-dollar gap in state highway fund for the future road building and maintenance projects. How would you address this shortfall, and do you support or oppose the idea of raising the state gasoline tax?
Well, first of all, you got to stop sweeping the account. You know, if the state would keep its hands off these specialized funds, there wouldn't be a problem in the transportation area. I think that we could probably tweak the revenue stream and how that's calculated a little bit, but it all comes back to the fact that the state legislature, because of its irresponsible financial management of the state, goes out and tries to grab the specialty funds that are set aside for a particular interest and not for a particular purpose and not for the general fund. We experienced that in the veterans community when the governor initially, a few days into office, tried to put put his hands on $1 million of a veterans account. He was prohibited by law, but he didn't seem to think that he needed to observe that. So we put a stop to it.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, reports over the last couple years have noted that Arizona has one of the worst shortages of doctors in the United States. How would you attempt to address this issue as an elected official?
So one of the things that we could do, and this would impact not only urban communities but also rural communities, is allow nurses to practice to the full extent of their education. And I know that the legislature has taken up this issue a couple times in the past, and it hasn't gone completely through. But one perfect example is anesthesia. You need a doctor to oversee the anesthesia, even though nurses are trained to give anesthesia. And so in rural communities, for the physician who might be an expert in the actual surgical procedure, doesn't want to risk the liability of also overseeing the anesthesia process and potentially take on that risk. And so allowing nurses to practice to the full extent of their education is a good first step to addressing some of the healthcare gaps that we see as a result of the statistic that you quoted.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, what is your opinion on welfare recipients being drug tested?
So that is something that has been other states where that's been done. It's been shown to have there are really low rates of anybody who is receiving welfare to be a drug user. I also think that the determination of who is eligible to receive welfare, by having the drug testing, it is, to me, it's a message of sort of deserving or of value or of who, trying to think how to say this best. Drug addiction is a private issue and is something that if there is a family in need, there are children who are living in a home where they, need to get food stamps or whatever, that their parent having a drug addiction does not preclude that child from deserving the assistance that they would get. So I think that fundamentally, I completely disagree with drug testing, but I also think that even if there was drugs being used in the home, that doesn't mean that that family does not deserve to get support.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, what is your plan to change the unemployment rate in Arizona?
In 60 seconds, go. Wow. Thank you for these questions, by the way. So, I mean, I don't want to also sound like a one-issue candidate, but education is going to be the silver bullet for us. There are companies like, I believe it was General Electric, yes, that chose not to bring their business here, their corporate headquarters, because we were not investing in education. So there wasn't an educated workforce that could do the job. So if we want to build our economy, we need to make sure that people that have access to a worldwide quality education, that they have access to affordable higher education or vocational training, because not everybody wants to earn a college degree. But on top of that, we need to make sure that we're promoting policies that promote entrepreneurship, that build small businesses and help them succeed, because that's the backbone of our economy. And if we really want to address unemployment, we need to make sure that the backbone of our economy, that these small businesses are being successful within the first 3 years. And that's what I'm going to promote while I'm in the legislature.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, do you support the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act, commonly referred to as Obamacare? And if so, say more about that.
You know what? I do, and I'm going to tell you why. One of the benefits of the Affordable Health Care Act is the fact that my son, who is 20 years of age, will be able to stay on my health insurance until the age of 26. And I have to tell you that gives me a great relief, because he is a college student. And the fact that we live in a state where I'm legitimately concerned about the future of not just my children, but the children who are going to go on to college or vocational something. I'm concerned that they may not find a job that is going to pay them a decent wage and will allow them some decent benefits. So yes, I'm supportive of the Affordable Health Care Act. I thought it was a really great thing for our nation. Of course, it needs a few fixes, but you know what? It's a great first start.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, what role do the community colleges play in our state, and how can the legislature help the colleges help Arizona residents?
So we do not value our community colleges enough. We have I want to say the largest community college system in the entire country, and too often they are providing remedial services for our students. So our public education does not have the proper funding to provide the proper education, so that when kids get to college, they don't have the skills they need to succeed at college. The community college is the best place for them to get their grounding, right? I started at community college. You go to you use the same books that other colleges use. Your teachers are trained at the same colleges that other universities are, but you pay not even a quarter, and the price is ridiculously small compared to in-state tuition at a university. So, of course, the community colleges allow for people without without wealthy backgrounds to be able to start education. They provide a good learning environment because the classroom sizes are small. And my time is over. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, what is your opinion and perspective on the Second Amendment and gun control?
Well, there's obviously a Second Amendment, and it talks about people's rights. I think that we do need common sense gun control laws and regulations. We got a we can put systems in place that take people off the eligibility list if they're on the no-fly list, if they've got felony records, things like that. The Second Amendment is not you can have a gun anytime, anywhere, and all kinds of guns. I've been a gunman a good portion of my adult life, and I know what they can do. Assault rifles and military look-alike weapons are not suitable for a civil society. So I think a lot of discussions been had on that subject. We all know the various
Thank you.
things. So common sense.
Thank you. Ms. Salman, how do you see money in politics and First Amendment rights balancing?
So, as I was saying before, I think money does influence politics. Is it the Arizona Republic just had an article about how there was $15 million spent in 2014 in Arizona on elections, and predominantly the Corporation Commission was the highest dollar race. And so that influences who gets elected to these very important positions. And then we have a Secretary of State that wrote SB 1516 that, I was talking earlier about how this country fought really hard for campaign finance disclosure rules, eliminating corporate speech, and it reverses a lot of it. And so there's an initiative called Stop Corruption Now that is working to repeal 1516, and I think that's a good step. I think also the Clean and Accountable Elections Initiative is also going to be a good step to helping prevent the influence of money in elections.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, with the CDC releasing domestic violence data showing 50-50 men and women as aggressors, what do you plan to do to provide shelter for men when none exists now?
So there is some really great progress that's being made in the domestic violence movement to understand the need of families beyond the traditional shelter setting. So shelters don't work for a lot of families. There's different restrictions on them, one of them being gender restrictions. Like you can't have a family with a boy who's 12 years old or older living in a shelter, for example. And that is changing, but historically that's how it's been. And so there's been a lot more movement to do community-based programs for domestic violence victims and survivors, to give them, it's called advocacy beyond leaving. So it's for the victims to understand what it is that they need. They know what was going to make them safer, what's going to make their lives work better, what's going to give them their family what they need. And so those programs work beautifully along all gender lines. So there's not this division of you have to, finding a place to go as a male, and there are more shelters for men being developed.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez, what are your thoughts on raising taxes on the wealthy?
Well, that is a lot easier of a question than the last two. I know it's a touchy subject, and I think that this issue should come in circles. When there are people struggling in our country and our state that need help, I think it is a responsibility of those who are well off to help. And sometimes that means raising taxes so that we could provide a net for people who are in that need the most help. And so that means that sometimes we have to pay extra taxes, and I proudly pay my taxes because I know that it's helping people. And so if that's the case, if we are in a time where people need help, then yes, I think it is a responsibility of those who are making a lot of extra money to help out the rest of the country. And in times when we're doing really well, then we come back and we lower taxes. So like I said, I think it comes in a circle.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc, given the current electoral environment and voters' seeming lack of trust in their elected officials, what actions do you think elected officials can or should take to gain and maintain the voters' trust?
So I was at the presidential preference collecting signatures and talking to voters, and what was really interesting is the voters I had the most difficult time with getting them to sign my petition were actually Latino youth between the ages of 18 to 24 years of age. And what was really striking is their comments. They literally referred to the fact that they didn't trust politicians, and they were really concerned about a Latino politician getting into power and promising many things and not following through, which I thought was an interesting comment. I think it's when I shared my personal story of coming to the U.S. at 6.5 years of age and being undocumented when their arms came down and they actually started signing the petition. The reason I share that is because when you start to diversify and really have people that represent the communities that they serve, it engages more people in the community. And so not that it's a fix-all, but really, again, having people representing the communities that they serve.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez, what is your opinion on the idea of giving more power to the individual states and granting less power to the federal government?
I mean, we definitely need to have a balance between, the federal government and the state. I, for one, don't think that we need to take our public lands away from the federal government. I don't think that we have the stewardship or the funding to responsibly take care of those lands. So I see a distinction right there. I mean, in terms of there's so many states that want to get out of interstate agreements, and I think that is wrong. But there definitely needs to be a balance, but I don't see Arizona as being abused by the federal government like so many people or so many conservatives think.
Thank you. Mr. Lucier, what can be done to help college graduates who can't get jobs pay their student loans?
Well, first of all, to take out a student loan to go to college is absurd, if not obscene. 150 years ago, we thought it was a revolutionary idea that we send young women to a public school, and a farmer would go, well, why should I support such an absurd kind of undertaking? So eventually, what we're going to have to do is open up our colleges and our community colleges, our universities, community colleges, so that people who have the ability and have the drive and the ambition to go to an institution of higher learning can, without taking on debt, without having to basically pay for it at exorbitant rates. So I'd like to work towards free universities and free community colleges.
Thank you. At this point in time, we will move to our closing statements. The first closing statement will be given by Ms. Salman.
All right. So I want to thank everyone for participating in tonight's debate. And, the reason that I'm up here is I truly believe we are at a pivotal moment in our state's history, and we need leadership. And I'm running because I want an Arizona where I, as a woman, have full control over my body, where my reproductive system, I call the shots over it, where my physical appearance is secondary to my character and intelligence, and we live in a culture where women and girls are validated as such. I want an Arizona where education is an unalienable right and not a privilege based on your zip code or race. An Arizona where leaving a child behind is a disgrace, a failure of humanity, and something we will not stand for. And there's so many other things that Arizona can be, that has the potential to become. We need the right leaders in place to make this vision a reality. And so that's why I'm running Athena Salman for House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Plumlee, your closing 1-minute comment.
Sure. So I think it's fair to say that all of us here on this panel are really going to agree on many of the policy issues. And what differentiates me is that I've got the experience, relationships, and the foundation already established at the House. I have been in office now for 6 months and have I got a bill passed through the House. It was a bill that I authored that with bipartisan support. Within a couple of months of being down there, I used the relationships that I had and got a bill passed all the way through and over to the Senate that would protect domestic violence victims from unfair evictions. So I also have endorsements from the professional firefighters, from Planned Parenthood, police, from the AEA, Neil Giuliano, Harry Mitchell, and 15 other House members who, House Democrat members who all want to see me come back. They've worked with me. They know what I'm like. They know my work ethic, and they know that I can get things done and that I will get things done. And they want to see me come back, and I certainly want to be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Martinez.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you all for coming, and those that are viewing at home. Making the decision to run for office is never an easy one, but, it's one I felt I had to make. Over years of service to our communities, it had become abundantly clear that the voters in our districts they're worried. They're worried about the schools they send their children to. They're worried about finding decent paying jobs, and they're worried about providing better lives for their families. Now is a time for real leaders who can step up and say that the policies our state are implementing and the laws we are passing are unsustainable and they do not benefit a majority of Arizonans. We need real leaders who will work on real solutions, and I spent the last few years cultivating the relationships needed to do just that. I know we have a long road ahead of us, but with your support, I also know that we can improve our public education system, we can empower our workforce, we can build our economy, and we can once again make Arizona the place that people come to achieve the American dream. I know it's possible because my family achieved it, and I know it's possible for future generations if we work together.
Thank you. Ms. Blanc.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. And again, Isela Blanc, running for the Arizona State House of Representatives. So really my experience, I've been living in this area, the District 26, since I was 13 years of age. I participated in Tempe public school system along with my kids. So I really know and understand my community. And what I know about my community from all the work that I did at Tempe Community Council, by volunteering at my children's school almost every day, whether it was Meyer Elementary, McCamey Middle School, or Tempe High School. I also worked with families at Tempe Community Council and as a school liaison at Holdeman. So I really got to have those one-on-one conversations over the last 15 years with people, and I'm continuing to have those conversations every day when I'm knocking on the doors. And more importantly, I can tell people that I grew up on 44th Street near Nevitt Elementary at the same time of growing up here right in the heart of Tempe, just a half mile away. So I am Isela Blanc, running for the Arizona State House of Representatives. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mendez.
I, too, want to thank everybody for their participation, especially for the conservatives. Thanks for keeping it fun with the questions. I want a government that doesn't just wish and hope for its people to succeed, but doubles down on its people, our most important resource, so that people's hard work is met with healthy communities and equal opportunities. I received simple investment that inoculated me from the worst of poverty: childcare assistance, youth workforce development, and healthcare. We don't do all this anymore. I need your vote to advocate for bringing back investment into our community so we can take on our biggest problems together. Our shared problems are unemployment, stagnant wages, and a widening inequality. It's irresponsible to lure the public into a debate over how to balance a budget with tax cuts and cuts to programs, and not over whether it's worth investing in our people who are facing our biggest problems too often alone. We desperately need to invest in healthcare and education and even new roads and other infrastructure, especially because these investments pay off in higher rates of prosperity for everyone, because we can't cut our way into the kind of prosperity that we all need.
Thank you. And Mr. Lucier.
Again, thanks for everybody for attending. I've talked about these circles of success, and as your next Arizona senator, I will push forward the whole idea of meeting demand in education, in training, jobs, economic opportunity, meeting the demands of health and wellness for all people. I have experience. I have leadership. I've been a leader since I was 19 years old, leading young boys into combat. And I've spent the last 8 years down at the legislature advocating for just those three things. It's not only myself, but I've got a number of Democrats who are supporting and endorsing my candidate in the Arizona Senate. They run from Fred Duval, Terry Goddard, Rich Carmona, Andrew Sherwood, and Harry Mitchell. So thank you very much.
Thank you. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating in this forum. And to our audience members, we thank all of you who took the time to come and inform yourselves before voting. We encourage you to visit www.azcleanelections.gov, where you can find information on the upcoming elections, download the Clean Elections app, and learn about the candidates running for office. A link to the video of this debate, as well as other Clean Elections debates, will be posted on that site within 72 hours of a scheduled debate. Please fill out the debate evaluation form you received as you entered and return it to one of our volunteers. Your feedback is important to the Commission and will improve future debates. Thank you all for coming tonight, and you are welcome to stay and speak directly with the candidates. Good night.